When studying AP Human Geography, what is the most important concept in the course? I'm sure you guys have heard your teacher say this. Spatial context. Now, they might not have used the word spatial context, but they probably surely said why of where a few times. Surely. I love how the transcript there called that. They probably used the words why of where. They might have talked about Patterson's spatial tradition, or in the 5 themes of geography, you might have talked a little bit about the theme of place. In other words, the characteristics, or the theme of region, which compares 2 different groups based on characteristics across space. So when we talk about spatial context, we're looking at the why of where. So when we study culture, it's really important to make sure that we understand culture as it applies to spatial tradition or spatial context. In other words, where are these people going to be on the basis of these religious, of these cultural traits that we're studying? So right here, you've got a map that shows the religions in the United States. And over this way, you've got a map that shows different cultural realms at a global scale. So I've got this word scales of analysis. Whenever you hear that, what this means is that you have some geographic phenomena that happens on a local level, and then you have some things that are going to happen more at a global scale or at a global level. You've got the global on the right, the more regional, or local-ish on the left. If you look at even more local, like maybe a county level, notice over here in the South, you've got a few counties that have religions that predominate that are not Southern Baptist. Being someone who lives in the heart of the American South, Baptist churches are everywhere, but so are Methodist churches, so are Lutheran churches. We even have Catholic churches around here. So, yeah, we can look at the map and it's going to show you red for Southern Baptist, but that's not the only kind of religion going on. You have to look at things and take it in at different scales of analysis. Now, connection to prior knowledge. I wanted to just take a 2-second review on regions, okay? Because really, one of the ways that you're going to spatially study and analyze culture is by looking at it at a regional level. Which kinds of regions is best used to help us understand culture? The 3 that we've looked at back in Unit 1. That is your formal, functional, and perceptual region. Well, culture can kind of be measured and looked at in all 3 ways. All right. A formal region, such as a mountain range, which would be a clearly defined formal region, could result in isolation, could result in a dialect. You've got a very clear and easily identified Appalachian dialect associated with people that live along the base of the mountain in Kentucky. I've got some family from Kentucky, and they sound really Southern. Many people might say I sound really Southern, but we don't sound the same. So dialect or language differences. Local cuisine, the kinds of food might be associated with animals or crops that can be grown in mountains that can't be grown in other places. And even local activities might be determined by the mountains as well. Functional regions, you have access to things that are broadcast on the radio at a local level. All right, you might have sports teams that bring people together. Perceptual regions, that also known as vernacular. So I don't know, surely y'all have been told this by your teachers, but perceptual and vernacular regions are exactly the same. All right, they are regions defined by certain cultural traits, but not so much defined by absolute boundaries. So you can look at the American South, or we just looked at that. The American South, here's the South, isn't it? But this is really showing you where a certain religion, or a certain denomination of the Protestant church is going to be within the United States. Notice that Florida, is mostly, Catholic? So you can define the South, but there's all sorts of different ways to define the South. That's what we mean by perceptual region. All right. Have anybody heard of the word placelessness? Anybody using the Aaron Faubourg book for human geography in school? There was an individual, I believe that Faubourg mentions placelessness. That's the reason why I'm saying this. I know that Faubourg mentions sense of place back in Unit 1, but placelessness is kind of this idea that all places especially places that are subject to the forces of popular culture. In other words, MDCs or urban areas where people go on business trips or on tourism or whatever it might be, they all look the same. I meant to show you guys some pictures of some fast food restaurants from all across the world. I forgot to put in my PowerPoint. But they all basically look the same. Look at McDonald's here. It's going to look kind of like McDonald's in Europe, kind of like McDonald's even in Asia. They might have regional food listed on their menu that we don't have here. But for the most part, they look and feel and act the same. So you can go from region to region, even different places on Earth, on a business trip or on vacation, and not really get a full feel of the uniqueness that exists in a certain location because it's all kind of the same. Okay. I also wrote up here cultural landscape. When we think about spatial context and culture, a lot of this placelessness, a lot of the things that also make a place unique are seen in what we build and how we change the landscape to meet our needs. You've got churches in the American South. You've got cathedrals in Southern and Western Europe going way back to even prior to the Renaissance. You've got mosques in Southwest Asia. These are all things that are going to be a part of the cultural landscape in those regions. So yes, you do have regional uniqueness to the cultural landscape, but you also have a lot of this placelessness, which is associated with the globalization of culture and the economy. Another term that I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit in the context of culture is the idea of commodification. Commodification. Well, we know if you ever studied economics, a commodity is anything that can be bought and sold. All right, so you give some kind of a monetary value to this and makes it commodity. That might be a simplistic version of that word, but if you are going to commodify someone's culture, that means you make it something to kind of be bought and sold, and almost in a way, or kind of making it into popular culture, which we're going to talk more about in just a second. But making certain elements of a culture into a commodity is what the definition is. Examples of this might be feathers in hair. A lot of Native Americans would always put feathers in hair. And I don't know if y'all remember this, but back in the like 2005, 2006, maybe a little later, maybe about 2010, girls started to have these feathers kind of wrapped up in their hair. And yeah, I thought it was kind of cool, but maybe it lasted a day before everyone's kind of like, nah, feathers are so 2010. A burqa. You see these different fashion designers making different color burqas that are kind of controversial in the Muslim world. Tribal wristbands. There was a picture in, I think, again, the Faubourg book where Ashton Kutcher had on this wristband that he got from some traditional village or wherever he went. I'm not sure where he was or what the context is, but he was wearing this wristband that then kind of took off as like some kind of a fad because Ashton Kutcher was wearing it. And then most recently, this is something that I shared in the teacher Facebook page just last week, is this Jesse Jackson for President 88 shirt. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Jesse Jackson shirt isn't coming back here in the United States, even though weirdly I have seen someone wearing it recently. This shirt is being worn by Korean girls mainly in South Korea. When we talk about Korean, we almost always mean South Korea unless we specifically say North Korea, just to let you know. But in this case, this Korean girl is wearing a Jesse Jackson 88 for President shirt, and she probably doesn't know who the heck Jesse Jackson is. All right, Jesse Jackson, I was 5 years old whenever Jesse Jackson ran for president. So why are they wearing this? Well, according to the article that we read, nobody really knows for sure, but it could be a mix of several things. One of those things is that there is this popular K-pop artist who was born in 1988, and so he wears a 88 hat. And a lot of the girls maybe think that, I don't know, he's cool or whatnot, and so they want to wear that shirt. And next thing you know, someone kind of important or someone of a higher wealth or higher level of significance might be wearing the shirt, and it's going to take off and start to diffuse, which we're going to talk more about diffusion as well later on in the PowerPoint. But that's a good example of what we're talking about, looking at the commodification of someone's culture. They took an idea from American culture and made it into something that is a big deal in Korea. Another side of this is the concept of cultural appropriation. Now, what I did here was I just took the definition and screenshotted it, put it into my presentation. But cultural appropriation is the act of taking or using things from a culture that is not your own. Here's the key to it, especially without, where'd my mouse go? Especially without showing you that you understand or respect the culture. Now, I think that really is kind of the key to what cultural appropriation is. Otherwise, we would be seeing it all the time. Anytime something might diffuse into another culture, or from one region to another, or one country to another. But here's the best example of what you may remember from the news not too long ago of cultural appropriation. And really, it depends on how you view it. Do you think these girls? What this is this girl here in the middle posted this picture on her Twitter page. I think this might have even been last year. I mean, it was not that long ago. And it was her prom dress, where she chose to get what is known as a kipao. Okay, it is a traditional Chinese dress. And then she posed in like a kind of a what everyone kind of took as a like a fake kind of a Asian kind of a pose. And many people in the United States were kind of like, oh, this is cultural appropriation. I mean, why is she doing it? She doesn't know anything about Chinese culture, and here she is wearing this. People that were of Chinese American descent are like, I wouldn't even wear a kipao, and yet here is this girl wearing this, and kind of almost like she's just laughing in the face of our culture. This one quote came from this New York Times article. It was posted on Twitter. It says, "I'm proud of my culture," he wrote in another post, for it to simply be subject to American consumerism and cater to a white audience is parallel to colonial ideology. And so people were really kind of offended by this. Ironically, many Chinese individuals, after this was retweeted a million times, not really, but like, tens of thousands of times, Chinese women in China seem to mostly embrace the idea that this American girl is wearing a kipao. So ironically, it was something that was kind of individuals kind of called cultural appropriation in the United States, whereas individuals in China were kind of like, meh, it's cool. I like the idea that someone would, they were even honored in some cases that someone would wear a traditional Chinese dress.